really done anything like this before. Mostly, on the YouTube channel, if you've ever watched that, it's really just in-car camera videos, and that's typically what I thought I was going to stick with. But recently, on one of the videos, I had somebody asking if I'd ever done like a walk around of the NC Miata or anything of that nature, and gone through, the list of parts that we've put on it, and some of the decisions behind that. So that's something that I thought I'd do today, especially when it comes to like the K24 portion of it. There's not a whole lot of NCs that have that swap, even though I think it's one of the coolest parts of the car now. And for me personally, being in ClubTR and competing with Gridlife in that class, the K-swap is kind of ubiquitous. We gave it a shot, kind of weren't really planning on taking it seriously, building the car for ClubTR with a 2.5, the common 2.5 swap that are done in these cars. But because we need to keep the stock cams in the cars, that really didn't let the 2.5 and any of its potential come through. And frankly, I think even with cams on the 2.5, you're still kind of covering up. You're still making it a little bit of a Band-Aid. So the ultimate solution, for us to be competitive in Gridlife, which we're still yet to be, but that's what we're pushing for, was the K24 swap. So I'll talk through that, talk through like some of the transmission choices and the limited slip, and just go through some of those details. I'm sure there's things that I'm going to miss. And like I said, this is the first time going through it. And so there's probably going to be some things that maybe you want a little bit more details on, and I'll try and go into those if we get the comments from it. So let's dig into the K24 NC Miata. Like I said, I don't think that there's a ton of these out there quite yet. And I do believe that that is going to change. I know barrier to entry right now really is the cost for this swap. The 2.5 is still, a phenomenal budget option, but I don't think that's the greatest engine there is. Certainly you get some lift from the 2-liter in terms of torque and whatnot. And if you cam them, you can get some good potential out of them. But at the end of the day, it's still, to me, and it's still an SUV, it's still an economy engine, and it's not a performance-based thing. And the potential just doesn't really feel like it's there. The K24, on the other hand, everybody knows the reputation of this. And what I love is how beautifully it sits inside of the engine bay. This looks natural. This looks exactly the way it should be. KPower Industries did this kit. And this was actually, I think, their first turnkey kit set up. I know they had done one for the folks up in Canada at one point. But I think this was the first customer car that they did the drop-in for. And it was done literally in a week. Phenomenal turnaround for it. But the beauty of this, for ClubTR, it has to effectively be stock. So this is a K24A. It's got the 06 to 08 TSX cams in it. And that's really the extent of what I am allowed to do for this class. And that's kind of why the K24 had to be the correct option. It's just the best bang for the stock motor that I can find. And there's a reason that it's pretty ubiquitous in the class, frankly. So as you can see, it's mounted in here on the V8 Roadster's subframe. I'm not sure if we can peek down there and see it. I can do a little bit of a deeper dive, maybe go under the car in a bit here. But the cool part about this is it retains all the factory suspension geometry. We didn't need to make any changes to pickup points or anything of that nature. I did add some camber bushings, some offset bushings in the bottom of the knuckle to get the 3.5 degrees that I was able to achieve before it. So that is one aspect that I think if you are tracking this car, if you're using it for a race car, that's something that you're going to want to pick up because of the change with the V8 Roadster's subframe. I was stuck at about 2.5 degrees after we made the switch. So when we were out at Road America, that was a limitation for us. And so those bushings, though, they got me right back to the 3.5 degrees that I wanted with it. Beautiful intake manifold. The setup is fantastic. We're revving the engine out to about 8,500 RPMs right now. We did go with the Unit 2 oil pan and a K20 K20 pump. So we're able to rev that a little bit more safely. Now, the only thing that I have decided to change with this setup, and that was kind of my goal, was I really wanted it to just be plug and play, low maintenance, low issues. You know, I'm okay with dealing with the basic stuff that's going to happen at any sort of track day, but I didn't want to go with anything crazy. However, the ECU is mounted right in this corner with the KPower kit. And I think for a street car, that's probably fine. There's plenty of, cars that have the ECU in the engine bay. I don't think it's a great idea, but a lot of people have been doing it for a long time. But with us, we were experiencing some higher temps, especially with it being on this side. Even with the heat shield for the exhaust, it was still building up pressure. And we've got the hood vents as well, the Singular Motorsport hood vents, but we were still seeing temperatures that were getting borderline, and we were getting some alerts inside of the Haltech, and I just didn't want to deal with that. I just didn't want to have the issues with it. So what we ended up doing is routing the wiring harness back here behind the cowl, right? So, we're not running the brace for the shock tower brace. I don't believe that these cars need this with the AA arm suspension. I think it's extra complexity, it's extra weight, and it doesn't give the stiffness that you need anyways. So that makes it perfect for this kit as well. You'll notice we kept the PCV on the back of the valve cover. That might be something that I change in the future as well. We might go to moving it up on top and making that evacuate a little easier, give us some more space. But again, we just routed the wiring harness back behind the engine and through the cowl there, bringing it down inside the passenger footwell. So we'll circle around here, look at the interior real quick, and see if we can get a good eye on it. So underneath the stripped out dash, we've got the ECU mounted here. I was able to repurpose the K24 or the KPower ECU mount here by bolting it up, and with a little bit of 3D printing help, making a bracket that worked up to the crash bar. And you can see the wiring comes right through the blower motor space. Now, ideally, maybe sometime in the future, I'm going to want to block that hole off, put a plate up there and just throw a grommet inside of it as well. I think Miata Cage makes a block off plate for the blower motor right there. So that's something that is on the docket for the future. But for right now, I think it's fine. And that'll get it routed up really nice, keep it safe, keep the temps under control. And it made it a little bit easier to mount to to connect to the AIM Solo. All right, so we touched on a little bit about why I decided to go with the K-swap instead of the 2.5. And to be perfectly frank, a lot of this was driven by the fact that we're competing in ClubTR, right? ClubTR in Gridlife has a rule set that says the engines have to be, for the most part, very minor exceptions, 2.5 liters or under, and they've got to retain the stock internals, right? So we're talking about primarily camshafts when we say, where the 2.5 liter comes up short. So what we had been running prior to this was a 2.5 from a Ford Fusion with the stock cams. And, there's a plethora of reasons that is not the efficient way to go. There's a very good reason that when people consider doing the 2.5 or when they look online for advice, the very first thing anybody says is just include the price of cams into the cost. It's something that you're going to want to do, and I wholeheartedly agree. It brings the engine alive way more than what I had. But because there's really two reasons. One, at the time, I had blown the 2-liter engine. The 2.5 wasn't necessarily in the plan in the short term. It was in the long-term plan, but for that season, when I blew the 2-liter through a fantastic money shift at Road America, I needed to get something turned around really quickly, and I was on a relatively tight budget at the time. So what that meant is I decided to make a cut on the cam side of things, and we just left the stock ones in there and get back on the road. That happened to work out when I decided I wanted to play around in ClubTR after a couple of Gridlife events, because you have to have that stock cam. That being said, the K24 just feels like such a superior engine. I think that there's obviously the reason that it has the reputation that it does. The 2.5 doesn't have that same kind of reputation outside of the NC Miata community, really. What we're able to do now, revving it out to 8,500 RPM very, very comfortably with the K20 oil pan or the K20 oil pump. That's something that speaks volumes on track when it comes to how frequently I'm shifting, where the power band really is, how it behaves. And the reality is, even with just the 06 and 08 cams in this K24 setup, the power band is so much better. Sure, I lost a smidge of torque. With the 2.5, we were making about 170 foot-pounds of torque. With the K24, I'm right at that same area. We'll still get it on the dyno, but I should be right at that same area, and I'm making a whole lot more power. With the E85, like I said, I'm projecting out around 215 or so based off of what other people have had, based off the other experience that people have had, like with the BRZ swaps in Gridlife and whatnot as well. So there's other aspects to it as well, right? There's the level of refinement, I guess, for lack of a better term. I still think the 2.5 is just an SUV motor, right? It is an economy engine. You can make maybe the same argument for the K24 in its absolute base form, but we all know the aftermarket on that is just totally different. The long stroke of the 2.5 just really doesn't lend itself well to being a track race engine. I've got buddies and myself that have tracked 2.5 engines for quite a while. They've got their gremlins, and at the end of the day, I just don't think it's worth the investment necessarily if it's going to be a dedicated track car. We went through on the previous one, CK Garage built an amazing engine harness for the car to try and eliminate just the pigtail issue. Not because that's absolutely necessary, but because I was sick of dealing with the pigtails during my track sessions. We know how expensive, a track day is, even down to the individual session. So I viewed it as any time that was missed because I was dealing with that misfire problem that was coming from it was time that was just money wasted, really, at the end of the day. So there's issues of that nature. Those can all be resolved, sure. But I still think you're just working with a lower bar to begin with. All right, so let's move on to the next aspect of the car, and we'll dig into the suspension. Ignore the rotor condition for right now. These were just held in place for over the winter. These always get replaced at the head of a new season. But what we've got over the last weekend or so, we installed the new FPS Longstroke Ohlins from Sakebomb. So what is cool about these is you've got the upgraded top hat on this. You've got upgraded billet fork for the bottom piece of it as well. And really the idea behind this was that I was thinking of rebuilding the Ohlins road and track setup that I've had on the car basically since I bought it. Right at the time when I first bought this car, the idea for it was really to be a hybrid between a weekend fun car and then just bringing it to the local track and tooling around. And so there, the road and track setup felt like the perfect fit. And frankly, for the last 4 years, I've been running that even on track as we've gotten pushed into the competitive time attack space with Gridlife. So what the focus was really was, keeping it rather compliant. I was okay with some degree of body roll and learning how the car behaved, under acceleration, under deceleration as we were pitching it left and right. The softer spring rates that came with the road and track setup, I think they're 7K in the front and 4K in the rear, really gave us the opportunity to learn how the car moves under different kinds of inputs, right? And I like that a lot. Ultimately, as we've progressed into more of a full-on track focused build, despite having some success on that really soft spring rate, I wanted to stiffen it up. I wanted to go a little bit more. I think we're ready to have the car stay a little bit more constant, a little flatter. So I was gonna need to either revalve the road and track setup or just start fresh, frankly. Now, Ohlins have, you know, part of the conversation with Ohlins is the stroke in the rear. And this is something that, you know, everybody talks about with NC Miatas and RX-8s in general, is the limited rear stroke. I believe that is something that is blown way out of proportion for 99.9% of people. And unless you can answer the question of how much rear travel do you really need, I think you're buying into some marketing on it, right? I think there is a place. I think for the right person, you know, having focusing on more rear travel is a big deal. But I'll promise you, from my own experience, you can get by on the limited rear travel just fine. Maybe it's not absolutely optimized, but I'd say there's a lot of other things to fix or improve on before you look at focusing on rear suspension travel and how that impacts your driving. Reality is, most people aren't getting 100% out of the car to begin with. And so, like I said, I think it's blown out of proportion a little bit. I wanted to stay with Ohlins because I loved how these have felt. The DFV technology, the way that you know, that functions and how it translates to feel on track has been phenomenal. And so for that reason, you know, I wanted to stick with them. And while it's not exactly a budget option, we're not talking about a $7,000 coilover package. I don't think that I am ready for that I am getting the most out of the car to warrant something that is, you know, has 2 or 3-way or more adjustability. Fact is, I don't plan on making that degree of change for every track that I'm going to go to. I'm not testing in that kind of granular way. That means I would get the most out of a 3-way change or anything like that. So these are perfect for me, and I think they're going to be the great setup. Ultimately, we went up to 12K front spring rate and a 7K rear spring rate. So you'll notice we're running the Progress front and rear sway bars, and for the most part, the rest of the suspension on this car is factory. Right? I'm not running any sort of different camber arms or anything of that nature. Our toe arms are all the same. That's one of the beauties of this car and of the NC Miata just in general, is the fact that I don't have to do anything crazy. They did such a good job with the suspension design from the factory that it's just not needed to change a whole lot to be competitive with the car. That's absolutely not the limiting factor on this at all. The other thing you'll notice, just running the stock brake calipers, there could be an argument now that a big brake kit would be beneficial here. Maybe to save a little bit of weight, get a little bit more stopping power, mostly to dissipate the heat better and improve the pad life. That's something that I could get on board with. Up to this point, it hasn't really been something that's necessary. I have fantastic stopping power. We can already brake later than a lot of folks can, get really, really aggressive on the brakes. And so it's just not been a priority for me on the car. As you can see on the rear here as well, all stock geometry, all stock arms and everything of that nature. Just haven't needed to make a switch. We've got the progress bar disconnected on the rear. That was just as we were doing the coilover install. We'll throw that back on. And then obviously, you know, the thing I like about them is the adjustability. Once we have the car down and get a little bit of miles under it, seeing how the new suspension feels, I'll plan to make some adjustments there. I'm expecting with the change in ratio between front and rear that I'm going to want to use all of that rear sway bar to keep the back end around. I don't like an understeery car. I like, you know, a sharp front end and an active rear end and something that I can manage. So that's the reason for using the big beefy sway bars. And I think they probably covered up some of the softness from the road and track setup as well. So I'm interested to see, you know, what kind of changes we want to make now that we're on a stiffer setup here. So I figured we'd go underneath the car just a little bit here. to get a different view. I am by no means a professional cameraman, so I apologize here, but I did want to show off the V8 Roadster's subframe. To be perfectly honest, this is something that has me a little bit nervous. There's some reputation from these V8 Roadster subframes being on track and put through a bit of a thrashing that they can crack or break entirely. And so that's definitely something that I want to keep an eye on. But you'll notice how that gave us the clearance necessary for the K24 oil pan. That's the Unit 2 fabrication oil pan, the K20 pickup, K20 pump. And we just wanted to make sure, that this is something that we check basically after every session, especially after an off. That's something I'm going to look at. Underneath here as well is pretty standard. You get a nice shot of the 4-2-1 KPower header. It's a nice piece. Now that's a Walters Motorsports 5-speed. I think there's probably questions about why the desire to go with 5-speed. So why the 5-speed over the 6-speed? Is probably a question that I'd get around the transmission choice. And the reality is the car is an 06 base model, right? So it came with the 5-speed to begin with. So for one thing, it was just an easier transition, but there's been plenty of opportunities where we could have made the switch to the 6-speed. When we were first doing the 2.5 swap, that would have been a great time. Doing the K24 swap, going to a 6-speed would have been a great time. But as I said, in my friend group especially, I'm not the only one with an NC Miata. We kind of terrorize the local track events altogether. Crashed a Shelby event at Black Hawk Farms last year, had a great time. We're respectful, but it's just funny to see a crew of Miata boys pulling up to a Shelby event. And those folks, my buddies that have them, they all had the 6-speeds, and I've watched them go through a number of them, to be perfectly honest. I think maybe through 4 transmissions across 2 people, and in fact, another one might have gone through a 6-speed as well. And so while I think that there are probably performance benefits to going with the 6-speed, especially with the K24 and wanting to keep it up in a higher RPM range, the reality is I am looking at the 5-speed from a matter of reliability. I talked about how anytime any sessions missed on track over a weekend is a huge expense. It's not just the cost of the parts of the repair that you have to do trackside or anything of that nature, but it's also just the fact that you paid for track time and you're not getting it now. And so I'm doing my best to avoid that. And from what I've seen, the 5-speed has held up better. I think there might be different opinions and different experiences that are out there for it, but that's really my decision based. That's the thing that I've based my decisions off of, is some of that experience that we've had. I think the 5-speeds are stronger. The Walter Motorsports 5-speed certainly is stronger. The Stage 3 is well built and can hold up to a lot. There's another variable to it as well. Like I said, I'm participating in Gridlife. I've been attending their events even through like HPDE for a long time. And there's a couple of guys that we got to know and became friends with that were running NC Miatas in GLTC, the Touring Cup, the wheel-to-wheel racing. And, they kind of pioneered it for us in a lot of ways because they're outside of Spec MX5. There isn't a lot of built NCs for the track, and that was something that they were really doing. And they ended up going back to the 5-speed as well with a really short gear ratio for longevity also. There's an additional added benefit that if you are spending less time shifting on track, as long as you can stay with power band and keep that up, there's benefits to having to shift less often, right? If you think of every shift being, half a tenth of a second, depending on the track, that can add up to a whole lot. And even at our local places, we've seen the 6-speed, create some awkward shift points from a timing perspective on the lap. And so the 5-speed has just been a better fit. And so we went to a 5/12 gear ratio. Again, this is something that we saw the GLTC guys do. And so that's something that I wanted to do with the NC. And it's got its pros and cons. Coming from a totally open differential. Like I said, this is a 2006 base model, so we didn't have a limited slip from the factory. It was obviously game-changing, life-changing on track, going to the OSG limited slip. When we had that one in place, that was still with the 2.5. So I was on the stock gear ratios, and it was still a phenomenal improvement. We switched to the 512s when we went to the K24, and I think that that's been a great choice for the most part. There's a couple of exceptions. Right now, it's a Cusco limited slip in the back end, mated to the 512 gear ratio. We are going to bring that back. We're going to put those gears into the OSG because I do like the way the OSG feels just a little bit more. I mean, it's minute. Either of them are a phenomenal limited slip. The car feels great on both. It just feels a little bit more compliant, I guess. I can anticipate it better with the OSG. At least that's what I was feeling. And so I'm going to go back to that. The 512s, where they run into problems, are obviously at tracks like Road America, maybe in even Mid-Ohio to a degree, right? The 512s are so short that I'm almost running out of gear in fifth gear at Road America. Certainly not accelerating to the same rate and at the top end. Saw compared to competitors. Now, it's not exactly an apples to apples change. There's drag differences for sure. There are the fact that I was on a base 93 tune and other folks are on E85 with well-established tunes. But we were losing a lot of top end mile an hour with equal or better min speed in the corners and exit speeds. Not every time, not in all places, but there was a consistent pattern that, we should have been carrying more speed. We were flat in the kink. So entering the kink at Road America at 117 miles an hour, stayed perfectly flat and still getting outran into Canada corner on the top end by some of our competitors. So that's part of where I am, coming to the conclusion really just from empirical evidence that we're running out. The data logs show that, we've got more. I can increase the rev limit. Right, we were at 8,200 RPM at Road America just for the sake of safety, since that was the first weekend. We'll spike it up to 85, but I don't know if that's going to net a whole lot of top end. So the reality is the benefits on short and medium tracks, places like Blackhawk Farms, the 512s are unbelievable. We pull so much harder out of the corners compared to my buddies in very, very similarly built cars. Theirs is a 2.5 with hopped up cams, right? But very similar from an aero package, that sort of thing. Our car is a little bit lighter, but still the acceleration out of the corners with the K24 and the 512s was phenomenal. And I think I would trade that. We have more tracks that are, similar to Blackhawk Farms, shorter technical places like Gingerman. Even a lot of Mid-Ohio really lends itself, I think, well to those shorter gear ratios. And so, I'm going to keep those in place.
All right, so let's talk about the outside of the car, the exterior bits and pieces and the things that I've gone with. My goal with this thing has been to maintain a balance between form and function. I want to make sure that what I'm putting on the car is of value to performance, not a hindrance to performance. I want to make sure that I am buying parts that have been tested, that for the most part have some science-based support to them where that is applicable. But I also want to make sure that it looks good. That's important to me in having the pride in the car and being something that I want to take utmost care of. Someday I might ball this thing up into a wall, and at that point, maybe my priorities will change. But until we keep it out of the wall, I want it to look as cool as possible. So let's start off with the hood. The reality is, if you are familiar with the NC Miata world, singular motorsport hood vents are something that you have either been told to put on your car or have considered putting on your car, or if you haven't gotten there yet, it's real close on the list. You are one Facebook post away from seeing somebody tell you to do this. There have been some options that have come out since these have been in production. It's been a long time that they've been available. Some hoods with the same kind of molded effect, for example, some different brands that have come out compared to Singular, and some kind of generic ones that people have fitted as well. But the cool part about the Singular vents is that, they at least showed us what they were testing with their CFD analysis. And they showed us the why for the placement and the size here. So, what I mean is they put out online the different high and low pressure zones beneath the hood of the car. And so the reason that they've got them here is because that is the low pressure zone. The high pressure zone builds up along the cowls here. Probably nothing that surprises anyone necessarily, but this is that high pressure zone. And so they want to make sure that they give the air an opportunity to evacuate before building up there, and thus reducing the lift that occurs underneath the hood, in addition to helping with, hot air evacuation. And so really, the way that we have this set up as well, the air coming through the front end of the grill, through the angled radiator, comes up and exits itself right here. I mean, the flow is coming right up at this angle where you see that cross brace. And because we have that area pretty well cleared out in the engine bay, I think we've got a fairly straight shot to that spot there. It's done a good job. I don't have overheating issues whatsoever with the K24 or even with the 2.5. The 2.5 after a 20-minute session would start to get up there in oil temps. That could have been resolved in other ways. I think the hood was doing as much as it could, but ultimately they're there based off of Singular's testing. So this is started life as a 2006 MX5 base model, like I'd said. I ended up switching to the NC3 front bumper, and this is going to be a common theme, but mostly I did it because I think it looks cooler. I had the NC1 front bumper with the appearance package lip, and I actually did like that, and it continued to grow on me quite a bit throughout the first couple of years of ownership of the car. And there was times where I thought, maybe I should just stick with it, not make the change, especially with the cost of swapping to the NC3 front end. But the common theme is I'll want to do stuff that looks cool, and Minnesota winters are way too long and give me way too much time to think and buy things on impulse. So that's kind of what happened. Ended up going to the NC3 front bumper, but like the rest of the car, there are some added benefits actually. The NC1 has quite a bit of drag from the front end design. The front bumper's got like kind of an underbite where the bottom of it is a couple of inches behind where it protrudes into the front. You can see with the NC3, like when you get to the profile of it, it's pretty close to straight up and down for the most part. And that is much improved over the NC1. So the NC1 actually creates kind of a draggy front end because of that bubble design. And so you'll see a lot of guys go with a really big air dam on the front of the NC1 bumper where it'll try and, trail off basically from this point here straight down to try and kind of replicate the same effect. In fact, I'm sure that doing that actually reduces the drag to a significant degree, better than the NC3 does even. But that is something that you need to do. You need to take into consideration. So yes, the front end looks way cooler. That is why I did it. That was my goal. I also got a really good smoking deal on the NC3 Club headlights with the blacked out interior to that headlight. And so that was kind of the catalyst for it. And then I had a friend who helped me out with the front bumper, had one for sale, sold it to me. And then another guy from Gridlife was amazing and was traveling to Minnesota, picked up the bumper and hand delivered it. So you just can't beat that kind of thing. We've decided to go with Racebred components front splitter. And there's actually a lot of Racebred products on this car. I really, really like that company. So it's also got their splitter uprights and the quick disconnect feature for them. And because I mount this car up onto a U-Haul to bring it to and from the track in most occasions, that front splitter coming off with their quick disconnect is fantastic. I did add the Professional Awesome rods just to give it a little additional support, keep it from flexing. I don't think that's necessary. I see a lot of guys run without them, but it's something that I wanted to just add. They also made this air dam. So what we've got is this air dam here that's set up on it, custom molded for the NC3 here. So it looks really, really good. And then behind that, we've actually got a bead of sealant against a little bit of garden trimming or garden edging so that there's not air escaping underneath it. In addition to the front splitter and the splitter mounts and quick release, these are Racebred uprights for the wing. The wing is actually from Kazespec Engineering, carbon fiber airfoil, which is just absolutely beautiful. I wish I was doing this when it wasn't dusty and grimy, because this is just a piece of art, to be perfectly frank. This was something that, frankly, I wasn't planning on doing. Really changed the behavior of the car. Everything was so planted, it was hard to overdrive the car. I had to really fight to get it out of sync. It's just amazing how much that changed, what kind of an effect it had on the car. And on top of that, like everything else, the carbon fiber, like I said, it's like a piece of art. It just pops, makes the car look so aggressive as well. So I really love that aspect of it. All right, continuing with the outside of the car. So we're allowed to run a carbon hardtop in ClubTR. And a hardtop for this car was something that I knew I wanted almost immediately. I was happy running with the top down at our local, track day HPDE things. It's fun. It's a really cool experience to be able to do that with the top down. It was at that point that I decided I wanted the hardtop. And I've always loved the carbon fiber look on like S2000s and whatnot. So that was something that I knew I wanted to go with. This is a DG Motorsports carbon fiber top. It's the race top, so it comes just, completely stripped. It's as light as it can be. Had to bolt the window in and whatnot, and I thought I was gonna leave it that way. Looks phenomenal. I'm ecstatic with how it turned out. I'm ecstatic with how it fits and how it sits. But because I don't transport this in an enclosed trailer, I quickly realized that I was going to need to make it watertight. And so DG actually sells a weather stripping kit for this. Runs right along here, perfect. And then has a seal for the bottom. And then just took some boat RTV basically and put it through behind the windows. And now we've got it all sealed up and it is watertight at this point. So you can tow it on the back of a U-Haul, no problem. And don't have water issues. I will say, as part of stripping out the back of the car and then putting in these AWR panels, which I'll talk about in a little bit as well, I lost the drains that come right here. So Frank, if it's going to be sitting out for an extended period of time overnight and there's inclement weather that's coming in, I just run a little microfiber towel and it sits right here, and then I have that kind of come out to here, and then it'll drain down this way, and just makes it a little easier to clean up. But it sat through some pretty big storms over race weekends and really just had a tiny amount of accumulation that was easy to wipe up. So for the most part, watertight. Nothing really special for the rear of the car outside of the wing, which I kind of like that, the wing takes the attention because it's a pretty amazing piece. But I did get bored one day and decided I wanted to do a bumper cut. And so went out back and taped off the section that I wanted to cut and lifted it up quite a bit actually. I think it was 3-4 inches or so, somewhere along those lines. And happy with how it came out. You know, for the most part, this was just me wanting to do the visuals of it. That's all I thought was really important here, was how it looked. But there's the added benefit that it helps to eliminate a bit of the parachute effect that happens with the stock rear bumper. So in addition to my personal preference of thinking that it looks cool as hell, it does some good work. What we've done now is gone to this beautiful Apex VS5 RS forged wheel. This is actually the S2000 sizing. This is the 17x10 plus 48, and it happens to just fit beautifully on the NC as well. I loved the brushed look, the beautiful finish on this. Not a big fan of black wheels, and gold just really wasn't going to go, or bronze wasn't going to go with the scheme of the rest of the car. So this has been the choice here. Now for 2025, Falcon's come out with the 660 plus, so that's something that we're going to give it a try here. So again, we're going to stick with the 245s. So it'll be the 17x10 wheel with 245 tires. You see the fitment on these is fantastic on the NC Miata. Last couple of pieces I'll talk about on the outside of the car are these cool little fender vents. This is by a guy named Vasco Chu on Facebook. He designed these, 3D printed these, so that's actually what they are. It's pretty cool. The fit and finish on them is phenomenal. He did a really great job building that out and making it sit flush. It looks really, really good on there. You know, for the most part, I think it looks really cool. Theoretically, it should be reducing some of the lift that happens under the fender by the high pressure zone that's built up by the spinning air due to the wheel and tire there. I have no data to know if it actually works, to be perfectly honest. I think they look cool, and the theory in this case was enough for me to give them a try. And then we went to this APR carbon fiber mirror. Really, at the end of the day, this is another thing where I primarily thought that they look cool, but they do have the added benefit of being a smaller profile than the stock mirrors. And so you've got a bit of drag reduction. There's, again, some studies out there that say that the side mirrors actually have a fairly significant increase in drag due to their size because of the front profile that it creates for the car. So, you know, how much gain, how much benefit am I really getting out of it? Not certain, but they certainly look beautiful. All right, so to the inside of the car. Now, there's not a lot that we can do in ClubTR from a horsepower perspective, right? When you're talking about what is effectively supposed to be a stock engine, you know, the goal here really was to take the Miata concept of lightweight and double down on that. And so that's where we've aimed. Now, we do have to meet a minimum requirement of 2,550 pounds for the car with driver. I'm a heavier guy. I'm 225 pounds. So that does give me some options to pull out a whole bunch of weight from the car. And I think we've got it sitting at around 2310 right now with a full tank of gas as it sits. We might end up needing to do some ballast this year because I went through over the off season here with a buddy of mine, and we stripped out any of the extra material, any of the extra wiring from the body harness that wasn't being used, which was the vast majority of it, especially with the Haltech ECU in here now. You know, we really didn't need a lot of that wiring, so we saved a bunch of weight there. The doors are stripped out. We've added the LRB aluminum door trays, right? There's absolutely nothing inside of here, but I didn't want to have it exposed. We're not running a full roll cage, just a roll bar. And so having that extra metal there, I didn't want that to be something that my arm catches on or anything of that nature in any sort of a crash. Windows just pull right out here. Nice and simple. I've chosen to go with the Sparco Evo L seat. At some point, I'm probably going to move to a containment seat. Again, this is remnants of the car being a weekend light track duty type of thing, mounted to the PCI floor mount and side brackets. It gives you the adjustability that you're looking for, so you can sit yourself in the car comfortably, and have my position where my shoulders can stay on the back rest here while reaching to the steering wheel fully. Racebred foot plate has been amazing. You can see it's dirty. The whole garage is dirty and dusty, and so that's tracked in here as well. But this is great for adding that grip and keeping your footwork comfortable and confident in the car. So really love that piece. Basically, the work has been on stripping the car out. The dash is there. It's effectively hollow. We need to have a dash for the class, I believe. But even if we didn't, since I'm already at the minimum weight and looking at potentially adding ballast, I want to maintain the OEM look of the front dash. I think it keeps the interior really clean. So that's been our goal here. Just stripped out the stuff behind it, got rid of all the vents since we're not running the heater core or anything of that nature. Got rid of all that extra space, and we're able to tie the Simpson arm restraint through the dash, which is pretty cool. In the back, we stripped out all of that excess when we were taking the soft top off to fit this Blackbird Fabworks roll bar. This is their GT3 roll bar. It's a really, really beefy piece that is basically the best thing that you can get before going to a full cage. And when I decided I was going to go to the hardtop, there was no need to maintain the soft top at all, so I wanted to go with this. The thing that I had run into before was actually with the Hard Dog roll bar that I had used prior. And the thing about any of the roll bars that maintain the soft top in its place is, while they are fabricated well, built well, probably plenty safe, they're not good for having a harness in the car. Their harness bar, both the Blackbird RZ and the Hard Dog and a number of others that I've seen, I think Seibel is another one, is that the harness bar that comes across actually intersects with the upright, and that pushes the harness itself off at an angle. And no matter what I did, I wasn't able to get the harness to be a straight shot through the seat over my shoulders. It was always going to have an angle, and that wasn't something that I wanted. So both from a stability standpoint, right, the bar is thicker, stiffens up the car quite significantly, as well as a safety standpoint, I wanted a true functioning harness bar. A little bit what I'm talking about here is, you can see on this harness bar with the GT3 roll bar, I can have the straps as a straight through pass. So what would happen with the Hard Dog and the Fabworks RZ roll bar is that this section right through here would actually be tilted off to this side. And the reason for that is that harness bar would actually meet their upright, because when you don't remove the soft top functionality, this section here isn't clear, and so that bar actually comes down at a more aggressive angle and interrupts this harness bar literally like right here. Okay, so as that upright comes down here, there's just no space for the harness to be in a straight shot. It's going to end up getting pushed off to the side, and I didn't want that. So instead of having the bulkhead completely exposed and having the fuel pump, which sits right back here, exposed entirely as well, I went with the AWR bulkhead kit, and it's basically these aluminum panels that sit back over here and cover it up. It adds a little bit of weight, but it also makes it look a whole lot cleaner. I think from the outside perspective, and we'll circle around to the passenger side, it's just a great look, and it's adding a little bit of extra protection. Here's one more quick look at the bulkhead piece. Just a nice way to keep the car looking clean. As we said, a lot of form and function has to meet together for me for the goals of this car. I think one of the coolest aspects of the car, especially on the inside now, is the Haltech IC7 dash. This thing is so cool. Great benefit of, going to the Haltech ECU when we did the K24 swap is, getting this dash put in as well. Gives me all the parameters, totally customizable. You can go through different pages here as well, to have different setups, different looks for whatever you find most attractive and coolest. And it honestly, it fits in there perfectly. It's a Mako Motorsports shroud in there to keep that OEM look. I see a lot of the ECUs that are, they end up getting kind of or not the ECU, the digital dash gets mounted kind of right here or right in front of the OEM dash. And that's a fine solution. I just wanted it to look fully integrated. So that Mako Motorsports piece has been a nice solution to have that in place. And then the last cool piece on the interior really is the shifter here. So this is the IRP short shift kit. Love this thing, buttery smooth. I formerly had a G Racing shifter in the car, and frankly, that is a phenomenal shifter as well. It's a better bang for the buck, frankly, than this IRP tool is. But this is a little bit smoother. It's got a better ergonomic feel. I like the handle a little bit more, and I think it fits in well. One of the things about it was I couldn't get the stock boot to fit in a way that I liked. I know I could have cut it. I could have modified it a little bit, but it wasn't going to be up to the standards or the way that I wanted it to look. So I 3D printed a little plate in there to cover up this space between the hole for the shifter turret in my hand to try and keep some of that excess heat out of there. Love carbon fiber, think carbon fiber is cool. So obviously this is not actual carbon fiber. Well, it's ASA with a carbon fiber finish on it. Went through, added it, did a little radio delete, and then deleted the window switches, obviously, in the cup holders. Those are of no use, but didn't want a gaping hole there. So that's another little something that we added. So that is the walk around of the NC Miata, the K24 swap that we're piloting for ClubTR in Gridlife. Let me know if you've got any questions. If you're curious about anything, I am an expert in absolutely nothing. I'm just effectively going off of my experience, but we've been doing it for a few years now. So if you got any questions or you're curious about anything, or if you're building your own car and you're wondering what has and has not worked and what I might have tried, let me know.